This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the Mark Weber.
Dub them ease.
And we are back for another edition of the Onside Kick right here on Most Valuable Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything in the NFL and everything with the NFL. Kind of redundant right there, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. This week got a jam-packed show talking about Lamar Jackson, and then we are finishing up our kicker rankings for fantasy football. We're actually finishing up our fantasy rankings by doing kickers. We're not finishing up the kicker. Could you imagine if we did like 4 weeks of kicker rankings?
Rank the kickers and go through it. Very detailed.
We're going to rank the NFL kickers, and we're going to rank every single college kicker.
That'd be fun.
Every single, even like D2, D3, NAIA, we'll rank them all. We're going all through the kickers, but no, we will rank our top 16 kickers later in the show. Before we get into everything, a little bit of housekeeping right here at the beginning. Number one, if you want to help support the channel, want to be a guest on the show, make sure to check out patreon.com/Most Valuable Podcast. Also, make sure to check our store link down below in the description where you can get an MVP t-shirt and rep the MVP brand. Also, make sure to go to mostvaluablepodcast.com, hit that bookmark. That's where you're going to catch everything for MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, make sure to go on Apple Podcasts and iTunes and give the not the Primetime Podcast, the Onside.
But you can do it for them,
You
too.
can do it for the Primetime Podcast as well. Give it a 5-star rating and tell everyone why they should listen to the podcast. It's already been a long night, and we're not even fully done, as we've got another podcast to pre-record after this one, Mark. But what we're diving into first, before we get into our kicker rankings, is we're going to talk a little bit about Lamar Jackson. And the reason why is it seems like at the OTAs or the mini camps or whatever practices are going on for the Ravens right now, he is shocking Baltimore. And just to read a quote, this one is from Raven wide receiver Chris Morris. After the first day of the mandatory minicamp, he said, "Every time he runs, I'm in awe because most people, especially a quarterback, can't move the way he does. So you just know that this year he's going to make some plays for sure." Then also you had C.J. Mosley, who's a Pro Bowl linebacker for the Ravens, say, "It's very creative. We don't know it's going to work until we put it out here. It's been given to us some problems on some of the plays. It's cool just to see the way we can swing things up with quarterbacks. As long as we don't have Joe Flacco doing too much running, that's really all that matters." So I want to ask you the key question.
Yep.
They've got Joe Flacco.
They do.
They now have Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
When is Lamar Jackson going to take the starting job away from Joe Flacco?
Well, I think there's an interesting part here because they obviously love him. They've loved him from the very start. The first thing they said about it, this guy's amazing.
There's a reason you traded up to get that 5th-year option on the guy.
Exactly. So some people might say, well, they want that 5th-year option because they want years. They want an option there so that way they don't have to start him now. They can start him in 2-3 years, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that they love this guy too much. Joe Flacco is not a bad quarterback, but he's just an average quarterback. He has a Super Bowl ring that his defense was amazing for, and that was a big part of it. Although he did turn it on, for sure. He was looking great that time, but he hasn't lived up to that big contract that he got. I think that he will probably be losing this starting job later in the season. I don't think it's an early thing. I think he's a later thing, but I will say one thing. I fully expect, because of a certain quote from John Harbaugh saying that using 2 quarterbacks at the same time gets the creative juices flowing. This idea here makes me think week 1 against the Bills. I fully expect Lamar Jackson to show up on that field at some point in time, and all of a sudden, you know, it's not a wildcat, obviously. He's not a wide receiver or anything like that.
Do you think he'll play somewhere else, though? Because there is another ESPN story saying that Lamar Jackson has been lining up at other positions during Ravens
practices. This is what I could
well.
expect. I kind of expect him to show up at wide receiver, play a down or two or something like that, and then this is where the trick comes in. He's at wide receiver. Joe Flacco's there. This is when you do the Wildcat. You switch the two guys, and all of a sudden everybody's freaking out. Lamar Jackson designed to run or something like that, or maybe a run-pass option, and then he gets to shine. The thing is, some little moment like that's going to stick out in people's heads.
And I don't think necessarily because the big thing that people are going to see is they're going to see this and go, whoa, wait, he said you don't want to play wide receiver. Why is he lining up in our position? You know what?
His coach is telling him to.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. Not necessarily all right, you're going to be a wide receiver. I'm thinking more importantly, all right, we're going to line you up in the slot. What's going to happen is you're going to start in motion. Joe Flacco's going to hike it. What's going to happen then, it's an option read at that point. So basically what's going to happen is Joe Flacco has a decision to make. Based off of what the defense is giving him, if the middle's open up, I'm going to hand it to the running back running right up the middle, or I give it to I give it to Lamar Jackson running a sweep route, give it to him, and then basically at that point, it becomes a Lamar Jackson on a bootleg, receivers down the field. All right, read the defense. If you want to run it, go ahead. If not, go ahead and pass it.
I fully expect to have
kind of like how the Steelers used to use Antoine Randall and have him throw some passes.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it happen a couple times with Chicago with whether it's a punter, whether it's Tariq Cohen, the running back, throwing passes. You have moments like that, and I think that the creative juices comment makes me think they're going to use him right away. But like I said, that's the kind of thing that's going to stick in people's heads. And Joe Flacco, he's not amazing. He's not a guy who's going to get you 30 touchdowns in a season. Last year he had 18. That's not amazing. 64% completion. Sure, you're happy with that. But like I said, he's not a guy who's going to go out there and do a ton. He just got over 3,000 yards. I don't think that people are going to be begging Joe Flacco to leave or begging for Lamar Jackson. Joe Flacco's not getting run out of town. But I just think that things are going to be a little stale. And this is a team last year who I would think describing as stale isn't that far off. Sure, they were able to score touchdowns. Their defense was really good. The running game was very good. But the passing game, below average. It's a below average passing game, game in, game out. It's actually, if you look at passing yards, they're one of the worst in the NFL. 9-7, which is okay. But, it's a winning record, but it's not amazing. You're not guaranteed to get into the playoffs or anything like that.
Yeah.
I just think that things are going to get stale. They're going to want something fresh. I know this is the wrong Harbaugh, but this is going to be the kind of thing like his brother who says, hey, now that I've got something fresh and exciting, I'm not turning back. And I'm not saying Joe Flacco is going to get injured, but I just think that you're not going to have that same level of excitement. They're going to see it in the practice field. They know what they can get out of Lamar Jackson. I think they might get into a point if they're like let's say a 6-7 win team and there's 4 games left of the season, they might say, we can get into the playoffs. I don't think Joe Flacco's going to do it. I think Lamar Jackson gives us that spark. That's why I think late season is when we're going to see him come out and see him take this job.
See, I'm on the other side, whereas at this point in the year, at this point right now, I am saying Lamar Jackson will not start a game this season. And I know some people might be like, whoa, that's kind of weird because Joe Flacco's not going to be here forever. For me, the earliest Lamar Jackson starts a game is next year. And the reason why I say that is the Ravens, to me, didn't draft Lamar Jackson to take over this year. They're not going to have a rookie quarterback come in. And I don't think they're going to be a bad enough team to late in the year say, all right, these are meaningless games. I think that if anything, they're in the hunt all the way through. And at the worst, they have another season like they did last year where it's like, man, if we would have just beat the Bengals,
but that's why I think that they'll make the switch.
Well, and that's why for me, I don't think the trigger gets pulled this year. That's why I think the trigger gets pulled next year. Because if they have another year of, man, we could have made the playoffs, but we were 1 win short. Then during next offseason, the questions start to turn. man, we were really high on Lamar Jackson coming into this season. Man, we saw him in unique packages last year, but when is this guy going to get the start? And it's going to turn into a Lamar versus Joe full-on next offseason, and then it will become a, hey, you know what? Joe Flacco is on a short leash in 2019 because at the end of 2019, the Ravens could get out of his contract. And that is what I think, is if the Ravens miss the playoffs this year by one game, then it'll be a, Lamar didn't start this year. All right, Joe, if you win the job next year, you're on a short leash because if we're going down the same path, we'll pull you, start Lamar, and then get ready after 2019.
Yeah. These mobile quarterbacks are always exciting. And that's something you can't ignore.
And it's exciting and a little bit maybe too hypey when you start seeing like the young Michael Vick. It's like, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
What I'm saying is it's exciting. You know you can get that excitement. It can spark your team.
Like Tim
Joe
Tebow.
Flacco is not exciting. Joe Flacco, no one's going to be excited about him. And when players start to say these things about Lamar Jackson, and this particular quote is interesting because he's not saying that he's an amazing quarterback. They're talking about his running ability.
You're talking about like the more common.
Yeah, they're talking about him as a wide receiver, him as a running back, him as a mobile quarterback.
Yeah.
These different options that he has. But those things are interesting. Now, what I find very interesting as well is I don't think people are saying Harbaugh is on a hot seat, but if this team starts to be in this kind of middle of the road area, they haven't been in the playoffs since 2014. This is a team that needs something to happen. They need some, spark. They need a shot in the arm. To me, if I'm Harbaugh, I'm sitting there going, I don't know that I'm guaranteed I'm coming back next year. I might, if I don't make a playoff this year, I'm another 9-7 team or 8-8 team. I don't know if that's good enough to get me my job back.
Yeah.
I might need to make that switch week 10, week 11, 12, when it's like we're in the hunt, but we're just a little bit outside.
And
I might have to make that exciting switch
and that'll
to
be
make it happen.
Different. If this year...
Well, that's what I'm expecting to see.
Yeah, I'm saying if this year happens and by week 10 we really get stories on like NFL Live and stuff of like, oh, you know what? Harbaugh's on the hot seat. Then my opinion might change.
Well,
it might be like
I don't think we need stories of him being on the hot seat. I'm saying that if this team doesn't make the playoffs next year, there's a very real question of should he be gone? Because it's been a while. That'll be 5 seasons that they haven't been in the playoffs. Let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this.
Let's say Joe Flacco starts every game this year. They go 9-7 and they miss the playoffs. Do you think the Ravens then give John Harbaugh another year and say, all right, you're on the hot seat? Or do they just fire him at the end of the year without giving him that, like, all right, you're on the hot seat this year kind of a season?
Sure. I don't necessarily know 100%, but I'm leaning more towards the fact of them saying, you've got this coach, or I'm sorry, you've got this player who we think is the future of our franchise. Joe Flacco's fantastic, but he hasn't done anything for us lately. Why didn't you make the change soon enough? I'm getting someone who I believe will work with Lamar Jackson, the future of our team. I think they would just get rid of him.
Yeah, I'm on the other side also, and that's why I like this topic, because usually me and you don't really get into the arguments too much like we do on the fast break. But for me, I'm on the other side of if they go 9-7, then it'll be like a, hey, John, we're not happy.
Sure.
This season, turn it around or you're gone.
Coaches have been fired for better.
Yeah, I look at this organization too, and this front office doesn't seem like the front office that just goes on a whim and goes, well, you're gone, get out of here.
Which is funny because it's a team that, packed it up and left.
Yeah, which is funny because the Browns did do that. But I mean, that to me is how I see this team of like, if he goes 9-7, they miss the playoffs, it'll be like a, hey, John, something needs to change. Then the pressure gets lit. And Joe Flacco, like I said, gets that short leash. And next year, I think 2019 will be the year where we're really dissecting all right, what week is Lamar Jackson starting? Because to me, if I'm looking at my crystal ball, Ravens missed the playoffs this year, 8-8 to 9-7 team.
Yeah.
Joe Flacco gets replaced as the starter sometime in 2019. I'm thinking maybe like a week 5, week 6 kind of thing. Maybe even a week 4 where he gets benched. Lamar Jackson then takes over, never looks back. Joe Flacco no longer a Raven after next year because the Ravens basically take the potential out because Lamar Jackson leads them to the playoffs next year.
I just feel that if you're comparing him to Michael Vick right now, and I know it's not a coach necessarily comparing him to Michael Vick, if you're saying it's your Michael Vick here, you're not waiting. That's not a guy you wait on. You make that change. Joe Flacco's not exciting. He's not going to be that thing. And I don't think this team is bad enough to be a 4-12 team or something like that. They're a team where their floor to me is 6 wins. That's not terrible. There are teams in the NFL that would die to have 6 wins. So I think with Lamar Jackson, I just think they're going to be too excited about him. A lot of it is going to be the preseason. We're really going to have a better idea of what's going to happen in the preseason, because if it doesn't really turn on, then okay, this is Joe Flacco's job. But if he really starts to turn it on, maybe against the second teamers, he's kicking ass out there, people are going to be asking, well, why isn't he the starting quarterback?
Well, and it's interesting too, because the one guy that I compared him to when he got drafted was Teddy Bridgewater. And the reason why I made that comparison was basically not just are they Louisville quarterbacks, but both of them literally got drafted with the same exact pick in the same exact way. A team whose main color is purple traded up into the 32nd pick and drafted them to get the 5th-year option. The only difference is that the quarterbacks that played above Teddy Bridgewater, where he basically didn't start game 1, started game 2 of his rookie season, were Christian Ponder and Matt Castle. The only difference is Lamar Jackson has Joe Flacco in front of him. So that's the only reason why I think it's almost a similar situation to Teddy Bridgewater, except put a year of him not as a starter before we get what Teddy Bridgewater. Hell, it could be the same thing. He just doesn't start this year. We get to 2019, Joe Flacco gets replaced week 1, week 2, and Lamar Jackson gets the job and never looks back.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible that he could wait the extra year. What I'm interested in just thinking, talking about that and talking about those comparison between those two guys, because Joe Flacco is a better quarterback, obviously, than both those guys.
Ponder and Castle at that point was not the Matt Castle that we knew.
Matt Castle has never been as good as Joe Flacco is.
He's not a Super Bowl champion.
He's not, but he's also just, he's a guy whose accuracy has only twice been above 60. 3 times been above 60. Joe Flacco has only been below 60 3 times. So they're very opposite of each other in that sense. I just think it really comes down to this. Joe Flacco, there's a reason why he's considered a playoff quarterback, because he turns it on then. In the regular season, he's nothing that exciting for you. I mean, if he's a guy who's only going to get you 3,000 yards again, less than 20 touchdowns, I know there's a team that wants to run the ball more often than throwing the ball, but if that's what you have, it's not good enough. It is not good enough to take you to that next step, especially when, yes, this defense is good, but it's not as good as when it had Ray Lewis. This is not that same team. And a run game becomes a lot better. Look at Carolina when you have a mobile quarterback.
Here's my kind of overall prediction for how this is going to go down. This year, Joe Flacco will start every single game, all 16 for the Ravens. Does Lamar Jackson hit the field? Yes, he does. They will have specific packages and maybe some trick plays for Lamar Jackson. This year will be a learning year for Lamar Jackson. Mainly what's going to happen is while Joe Flacco's out there starting, Lamar Jackson is going to learn a little bit from RG3, because I find it interesting that this team brings on RG3, then goes ahead and drafts Lamar Jackson. Why not learn from a guy who, RG3 is not an amazing quarterback, but that rookie year, until he got injured, he was really good. Rookie of the year stuff.
I don't buy RG3 is going to be on the season come regular season.
See, I think so. And the reason why I think so is much of the kind of philosophy of back in the day. This was way back. Nowadays, teams usually just carry 2 quarterbacks. Back in the day when we were kids, it would be 3 quarterbacks. You would have your starter, your backup, and then if you had that young quarterback, basically you're expecting that young guy not to learn from the starter, because the starter doesn't want to teach him anything because you don't want to have your job taken from you. You're going to learn from the journeyman quarterback, like a Mark Brunell late in his career.
Mark
kind
Sanchez,
of a career. Mark
just last
Sanchez
year.
kind of a guy. Like, and that's what I think RG3 will be for this team with Lamar Jackson.
Buy it. Not yet. I don't think of RG3 in that. I think the NFL has always kind of put out there that they don't believe in the mentality and the attitude of RG3. They've always been down on him about that.
But I don't think it'll be an NFL thing. I think it'll be a front office Ravens thing that's going to trust him.
Well, sure. I mean, they're the ones that signed him.
Yeah,
they're the only ones that were interested in him.
To kind of take Lamar Jackson under his wing, per se, because when you think about it, RG3 and Lamar Jackson, not too much of different quarterbacks rookie years. Like, they're similar quarterbacks, similar skill sets. So I just think that they're going to use him to teach.
I think Lamar Jackson is going to be good enough to secure the number 2 spot very easily, for sure. And this is a team that is going to want those roster spots for other people.
And I'm not saying like an RG3 is going to be above him teaching. It's more going to be
I just don't think there's room on the roster.
And we'll wait to see. I think that they will keep 3 quarterbacks and use RG3 as that mentor behind Joe, because Joe Flacco's going to basically have the Big Ben situation going on, where it's like, I ain't teaching you crap. We were hearing news like 2-3 weeks ago of like, Joe Flacco's not returning Lamar Jackson's calls. What is going on? Well, of course he's not. He doesn't want this kid to take his job.
And he knows it's going to happen.
And he knows it. Like,
he's been better. He's been better about it than Big Ben has.
He probably knows. Well, yeah, he hasn't been outspoken about it like Big Ben has. Big Ben's actually talked to the media about his whole Mason Rudolph thing and what he was going through. At least Joe Flacco hasn't done that. This will be an interesting kind of battled situation, though, as we move forward going into this year, next year. Any final thoughts before we move on into our rankings?
I'm just excited to see how he does in the preseason.
Well, we're going to see a lot of him this preseason because they're not going to play Joe Flacco for a lot of it. So it'll be interesting to see how much play time and what we see from Lamar Jackson in the preseason. This is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below. When will Lamar Jackson start for this Ravens team? Will it be this year? Will it be next year? What are you thinking down below in that comment section?